Everybody, this is a public hearing. This is the Lowell City Council Economic Development Subcommittee. Today's date is February the 10th, 2015. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Chairman Belanger.
Here.
Counsel Kennedy.
Here.
Counsel Martin.
Here.
Counsel Rourke.
Here.
4 present.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We're also joined today by Councilor Rita Mercia. Thank you, Rita. Parking Director Jim Troop is here on hand to answer any questions. We're also joined by City Manager Kevin Murphy. And there's one item on the agenda today, and that is exploring enforcing the current parking regulation according to ordinance and investigating the possibility of an overnight parking ban. Now, we discussed this, I think it was back in December, and we had neighborhood groups in, and basically the same audience you see here, discussing that, after, the council getting feedback from downtown businesses, it's been brought up time and time again that as downtown has evolved over the years, and it's become a neighborhood. There's, since 2004, I believe, about 1,200 new units to the downtown, and there are many positives to that, and I think all the merchants value that as well. But at the same time, it seems like some, not all, and visitors have become a little too accustomed to parking on the street and staying there nights and weekends, and it's basically taking a heavy toll on merchants as we see turnover, businesses come and go, which is a constant thing throughout the years, and not just here, but throughout the Commonwealth. That's the number one complaint that we hear from merchants is parking. When the streets are full, we have garages that are, half to two-thirds empty on nights, and the perception is there's no parking, but there is. But it's just everybody wants to park right in front of their destination, so that poses a problem as well. So it's, again, brought up through the merchants to voice to this council, to the subcommittee, as to the seriousness, the magnitude of this issue and where we're at today. So first, what I'd like to do is open up some of my colleagues here before we open it up to the audience. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, I'd like to offer a motion for the subcommittee that we could discuss if the motion is seconded, and that motion would be that we refer the downtown parking situation to the city manager's office for a report and recommendation within 30 to 45 days. If I can get a second on that motion, I would like to speak on it.
Okay, just for clarification, Councilor, so are you talking about enforcing the ordinances and the parking ban all in one? The whole,
Yes.
okay, so that would be...
Second.
Okay.
If I could on the motion, I mean, we've met on this a couple of times now, and we've heard testimony from several different people, both from merchants and retailers as well as from residents. And I think that some of that information might be anecdotal, and that if we're going to make a move like this, which would be somewhat drastic, and if we want for it to be a long-term solution, that the prudent and thoughtful thing to do would be to have the Division of Planning and Development and the Parking Department take a good look at whether or not the problem is real or just perceived and how serious it is, and then provide a solution that the council could then consider. I think that might be better than to just go on without that, and so that's my motion.
Okay.
That's the reason for it.
Okay. Motion by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Rourke. Roll call, please, Mr. Clerk.
Chairman Belanger.
Yes.
Counsel Kennedy.
Yes.
Counsel Martin.
Yes.
Counsel Rourke. Yes. 4 yeas.
Okay, Councilor Kennedy.
Well,
Excuse me, Councilor Martin. Councilor Martin.
All right. Well, I do appreciate that we have some other people here, members of the public are here, and I think it's important to hear from them. If we're going to still look at this, I think that's fine, but folks have been at least to a couple of meetings now, so I'd ask that we hear what they have to say. I'd also, though, ask Mr. Troop if he could weigh in on what enforcement of the current, I know you're going to have a chance to come back with a report, but what enforcement of the current ordinance might look like. I mean, I know the last time we were here, businesses and residents seemed to think a little enforcement on Saturdays or just the 2-hour limit might do the trick. And maybe we need something more than that, and I know you're gonna look at that, but is that, the ordinance is in effect Monday through Saturday, 6 to 6, is that right?
Yeah, we're ready to proceed at the wish of the council. The current ordinance reads Monday through Saturday from 8 o'clock a.m. to 6 p.m. Really, at the flip of a switch, we're ready, our staff is ready to handle that. My understanding is that we are going to look at Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, but I thought maybe a little bit lesser time to enforce on Saturdays would more gear things towards when the business hours are from 10 to 6. We would start at 10 o'clock.
Okay. And now would there be I mean, I think if I don't want to get too far ahead if we're going to have a report, but I think we talked about having a PR campaign, maybe a series of warnings. I mean, I think the last thing, people come downtown on a Saturday, end up with a ticket because they stayed 10 minutes over, is not really the problem we're trying to address here.
Right.
So I just ask you to consider something like that for what comes back.
Thank you, Councilor. And just a few of your points, yes, they're well taken. I did have every intent, there are neighborhood groups here. They most certainly will get their chance to speak their voice. But we have, two parts to this motion. I mean, the council, we have control to enforce the ordinance as stated, which is Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. tomorrow, if we'd like. But the parking ban, if it does receive support and is passed, we'll need first a ordinance crafted by the law department, then a full council vote. So, but to get to your point, yes, I don't want to blindside the residents, the businesses at the same time with so we're going to start tomorrow type enforcement. No, I totally agree with you. That's not, we want communications. Before we converted to two-way traffic, I think the city and planning development did an outstanding job communicating to all businesses and residents in the downtown. Literally, no one was surprised that I knew of. So, yes, there will be full warning if it does go through, and I respect your opinion on that, well. Jim, anything to add there, or?
The only thing that I would have to add is that we did do some preliminary research about this being a real problem, and we do see that it is a real problem, especially on the nights and weekends. So we'll prepare all the reports and come back with a recommendation, however you ask for us to proceed.
Okay. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that the overnight parking ban was a good alternative to enforcement on Saturday. In other words, what occurred to me is that if there was an overnight parking ban, we wouldn't need to do enforcement or to hand out tickets on Saturdays or in the evenings. What's been brought to my attention is maybe the overnight parking ban makes more sense if it was just for the weekend rather than for the whole week. And I'm not even sure that the overnight parking ban is a good idea. I just think that we should be very careful and thoughtful before we take any action, because we have a balance that we have to maintain here between the residents who are living downtown and the retailers that probably depend on a lot of business on Saturday. And so I think that we just want to be very careful about doing that. We could find ourselves, if we were to implement this right away, we could find ourselves in a couple of weeks meeting here again because we have people complaining that they've gotten a lot of tickets and that too many tickets are being given out on Saturday. So I just think that before the council takes any action on this, that we should be very careful and that this should be a full and complete study, and that everybody on the council should be convinced by the parking department and the administration as to why we should take this action.
Yep, point well taken, Councilor, but are you alluding to like a outsource for a feasibility study? Because I think with data that Mr. Troop can provide and the manager's administration can provide, we can sort this out among is that what you're alluding to?
No, Mr. Chairman. I think that we've had discussions about outsourcing a study before, and I think that the city has the capability to do it in-house, so I don't think that we need to expend money that way.
That's what I thought. Thank you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the parking director. I realize that there's a problem. I don't know to what degree, but it seems that there's a concern with people parking overnight, especially on Friday night into Saturday, and then when people come on board to be patrons of the different businesses, they're not allowed to park because people are there all night long. And I can understand that we're looking in ways to stop that. And if it so be is the fact that we have to put something in effect, that's good. So as of right now, do we have extra people assigned to come in on Saturdays if this is established, city employees?
We currently do not staff Saturday. However, with my current staff, we are prepared to come in and start enforcing on Saturdays, yes.
So would this be overtime, or would this be?
Yeah, we worked it out that it would be roughly a $10,000 per year overtime cost. We do have a line item in our budget that would be able to accommodate that without asking for any increases. It would be an overtime cost. We also staffed with an additional enforcement officer. The schedule would be 10 to 6. Therefore, if we did enforce to 6 o'clock, it would be part of our normal payroll budget, would not be on overtime.
Do we know when the business is open on a Saturday morning?
Well, I would basically go by a 9 to 5 on most businesses, but we do have a pretty good mix, and I would think that the restaurant crowd would actually extend out to about 9 o'clock.
Now, this would just apply to the downtown, or would this be a Saturday parking ban on the whole city? Because there are businesses in every corridor, Pawtucketville, Centerville. Would that apply to Westford Street, let's say, the businesses there, or just particularly the downtown?
I think if we craft something that explicitly details where the Saturday enforcement would be, if we created some type of a Saturday district, I think we would be able to really get the word out where would be enforcing and such. Do I think that we need to enforce this in the residential areas or anywhere that it's heavily populated with residents? No, I don't. I think that this would benefit the businesses, and if we focused strictly on those type of neighborhoods, we'd get the most effect.
Do you have an idea on an estimated revenue stream that we take on a Saturday for parking downtown? Would you estimate some?
I looked at possibly having an increase of about $250,000, and that did not include any garage revenue, increases in garage revenue, because that would be very hard to measure at this point, because we don't know how many additional pass cards we would need in the garages, or how many people that are parking on the streets that have pass cards would now be going into the garages. And therefore, that's a zero effect on the garage. So we look at it conservatively as being about a $250,000 increase in revenue for the parking department.
I always thought that people that live in the downtown, in order to live downtown, they were assigned a spot in the parking garage. Are you telling me that there are people that live downtown that don't have any place to park, and they resort to parking on the main streets?
I think that that's a personal choice. They would have a space in the parking garage if they came to us. I think that that's a choice that in order to avoid the pass card, they're choosing to.
Or are they having visitors overnight that don't have a pass card, so they're parking on the street itself?
Again, that's another possibility.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Great questions, but I think I may be of assistance now. Every unit, like I said, about 1,200 new units in the downtown. Every unit that got approved since that point was allocated one spot in one of the garages to get approval, because that's what we, on the Board of Appeals prior to me getting, that's what we approved of many of these projects, and they had to have at least one spot per unit allocated in the garage so there was room. So, a lot of the residents kind of had the knowledge that they had to go in the garage, but over the years, it's become convenient, and they've become a little acclimated to using the street, but due to the fact that there's no enforcement on weekends and nights. So that's part of it. But many of them, a good percentage already pay for placards, but they don't, it's a lot more. When you're coming with groceries, it's far more convenient to park in front of your door. So to answer your question, yes, every unit has one approved space allocated in one of the garages, to answer your question.
Well, who are we to say that they can't have company? So I guess they'll have to pick up their guests and bring them to their apartment. I don't know,
I agree, yep. Okay, Counselor Rourke.
I think actually the council brings up a good point as far as the overnight ban. But as such, I guess what we're asking the administration to do is to bring the ordinance as it's written right now back to us to vote on the ordinance that's already in place. We've talked about this for months already. I think the last subcommittee meeting we had, we set a January 1 date as far as getting word out and decide to enforce it. I'm sure the manager can get this done much faster than 30 to 45 days. If you want to take the no parking and separate that, maybe look at that going forward. But, if it's a problem for the residents and for the businesses today, it's still going to be the same problem as it was 2 months ago or 2 months from now. The longer we wait, I'm not sure if it makes sense. But, I can defer to the manager to see how fast we can get this back in front of us. But maybe the idea of separating the two might be beneficial for now. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor, I see you. Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, the reason that we have the motion, the reason that we're asking the manager for the report is in part to make sure that what we're doing is sound and that we don't have to change it going forward. It's true that when the permit was given for, say, a one-bedroom unit, that they had to have one parking space in the garage. But you could have a couple living in that one-bedroom unit, and they could have 2 cars. And they have 1 car in the garage, so they have to do something with their other car. Now, they bought the unit or they're renting without knowing that there's been any changes to the parking or that they wouldn't be able to park downtown. So they rented or bought their unit based on the assumption that the second car would be able to be on the street. And now we're going to change that. And I just think that there's a lot to consider here and that we should just be careful as we move forward.
Yeah, I see your point. And as I alluded to earlier, we could separate these two, but I guess the more information, the better. What the manager can provide in a week or two, I guess, ups and downs, if you will, of enforcing the ordinance until 6, he'll give us those, that balance, if you will, and the parking ban, again, will have to be crafted by the law department. But, Councilor Mercy, to your point, then I'll open up to the public, is that, yes, we want residents to thrive and have visitors, and we do. We want to encourage them to bring their friends and family down and go out, and that's, but that, there was no promises of overnight permanent for roommates or, as Councilor, it's one spot in the garage. If you have visitors in any other city or town throughout the Commonwealth, you got to go in the local garage, basically. And this is part of the problem. We want to encourage residents to have friends now. We most certainly do. But this is a fine line that maybe the manager will come up with a compromise of some sort. I don't know. Maybe Jim Troop can do some investigating what the other cities and towns are doing for visitors lots or visitor parking, something along those lines. But all in all, that it's been taking a heavy toll, the amount of cars on the street. And it's, as I spoke last Tuesday, it was 7:30, and you can go on any street down in the central business district, and there's nowhere to park. You might find 1 or 2 and get lucky, and the merchants will be closed. The banks and retailers will be closed. The restaurants will be open, very slow, being a Tuesday, and there'll still be nowhere to park on the street. So that kind of sums it up. Go ahead, Councilor.
Mr. Chairman, since we're talking about the parking garages, if I might interject the fact that the parking ban has been lifted as of 4 o'clock, and you have until 6 o'clock to get your cars out of the garage, or you'll have to pay. So since people are watching, I would hope that they'd be aware of that.
That's a very good point, Council. And we're also joined by Councilor Leahy here tonight. Councilor Leahy, would you like to chime in?
Sure, thank you. One concern I have when I'm listening to the whole conversation is how many, just take the Roy garage, for example. How many spots are in that garage?
Call it 1,100.
Okay, so what happens with people who pay for these spots and then they come down to work and they don't have spots? Because I've heard from a few people this week about this conversation that we may oversell the garages, and I don't know what you pay for the monthly pass, whatever it is. Is that gonna lead to more problems, that now all of a sudden we have more people who can't fit into the garage?
No, I think some of the complaints that we're hearing are actually because of the storm. This is completely unprecedented, and the city has never opened up all of the garages, as far as I know, for the storm. And considering the weather that we've had over the last week or so, I think it was probably a good decision to open them up, but I think a lot more people benefited than should have, a lot more than just Lowell residents, and a lot more than people that don't have access to off-street spaces. So this is a little bit of an exception to the rule. Our policy is, in the way that the contracted vendor manages the garages, if people have a pass card for the garages, they will never be denied a spot in our garages. And if that ever happens, I need a phone call to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But if somebody shows a pass card, we will hold a spot as part of their management for all pass card holders. They will never be denied a spot in the garages.
Okay, but when you say that, though, I mean, a couple of people that called me, so they showed up and they have their pass card, but the garage is full. So what do you mean by that?
I think the only times that I've heard that happen are in this past week with the snow ban. We had a couple of days in a row that we had free access in and out of the garages. People left their cars there for a couple of days, and as the city recovered and opened back up for business, we really weren't able to keep up with people leaving and then actually coming back to work. So this has been an exception, and I do have to credit our staff for making as many spaces available as they could to people trying to park.
So if we put the ban in place overnight and we have more cars in over the weekend, you don't think it'll be a problem on Mondays? And
no, because I think we're really talking about people that are there from January 1st to December 31st. We're not really considering the snow bans and you're also talking about quite a significant few that already have parking passes that they're accounted for their space in there anyways.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, what I'll do is now open it up to the public. I know we have a few downtown residents here. Who would like to speak first?
Prescott
Hold on,
Street.
Jack. Want to make sure your microphone's on. Try again.
Okay. Where is the?
I think.
Keep talking.
Yeah.
Turn it on and
Oh, okay. I heard that.
You're good.
Okay. Hi, Jack Moynihan, 88 Prescott Street, and I'm also the co-chair of the Lowell Downtown Neighborhood Association. And as I've mentioned at the previous subcommittee meeting, I and the Downtown Neighborhood Association are supportive of the idea of enforcing all the hours of the meters as listed. We're supportive of the downtown businesses and consider them neighbors. On the other hand, as far as the overnight parking, I personally am neutral towards it. However, I couldn't really support it because we recently had a poll on the LDNA website, and I know Council Belanger had it sent to him, and I could send it to the rest if you're interested. And we got a lot of negatives about that particular aspect as well. And plus, a number of people have spoken to me directly about that. And one of the complaints I've heard was that people thought that it was kind of like negative anti downtown residents, sort of like push the residents out of the way. And other people brought up the aspect that in other parts of the town, if you want to leave your car out or you have visitors that came up. The idea of visitors came up very frequently. So those are some of the things the negatives that people brought up. Just if I could make a couple of suggestions, if you did want to do something to say have more time to clean the streets with snow or just generally clean, perhaps you could have alternate nights where people couldn't park, or on one side of the street or the other. But as I say, we just can't support the overnight ban. Another factor that people have brought up is they're not sure that would speak directly to the issue of freeing up spaces for the businesses, because some people, I'm afraid, might just move in the morning and park in front of businesses, and some of the traffic or the parking that you see all day long at businesses, particularly on weekends, is from employees of downtown businesses. So anyway, just wanted to voice my and our group's thoughts on the matter. Thanks for what you're trying to do.
Jack, thank you for your input. I very much appreciate it, but a couple notes will make Jim Troop to you that, visitor parking comes up once again. Maybe, we have those side streets, Lee and Page, that are in the outskirts. Maybe we can designate those as a cheaper rate or overnight or visitor in that area. And a point that you make very well, Jack, is that, yes, owners and employees are on the street as well. And I've had conversations as they complain about cars on the street. They're often their vehicles on the street as they're doing it, and they're not doing themselves any favor. So that point is well taken, and this is going to stand for them. Employees and have to get off the street as well. Absolutely. This is not just the target residents. They need to want to help themselves as well. So that has been echoed time and time again, and still will continue as I know I speak to business owners. That's where it starts with yourselves. So I understand your point there. Anybody else like to chime in?
Hi, my name is Stephen Green. I reside at 181 Market Street. I'm also an officer in the Downtown Neighborhood Association. And I just want to sort of second all the comments that Jack has made, and that downtown parking is a concern. We're trying to be reasonable about it. But I also want to point out that there's some other parking issues downtown that should be addressed. And it's probably something that the police should be doing on a regular basis. We have a number of fire hydrant violations, people parking within 2 or 3 feet of a fire hydrant, considering that acceptable, and this goes on for hours, sometimes overnight. And that I'd like to second the idea that some sort of accommodation be made for visitors, a visitor pass, something that could be bought from the garage, and that people could use for their guests coming, or figure out some way to accommodate that. And that we've talked about this in the past about business validation for parking, to sort of make it more palatable for people to go in and use the garage. Because the idea of the garage was to be able to accommodate more cars downtown. And yeah, everybody likes to park right in front, but sometimes if you're going to be there for a short period of time, maybe the 2 hours might be a reasonable amount of time. Maybe we have some areas that are even shorter periods of time. But the idea that if you enforce until 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I think you'll push a lot of people off the street. I myself will come in, and if there's a space at 5:30, I will take it, and I'm out of here by 6:30 in the morning, and I have a pass in the garage. If there isn't a space there, or I knew I was going to have to pay for it, I'd go in the garage. So something to think about, and that's something to consider if you want to push to a 6 to 8 p.m. Time frame. Go out to 8 o'clock, because at that point, I would assume that many of the guests or customers for the downtown establishments that are coming for the evening would probably be coming in at that point. If you do a parking ban overnight, you've got some challenges there. What are the hours that you're going to enforce it? Who's going to enforce it? Is it going to be a police issue? Are you going to tow? You're going to use street sweeping as one of the amenities that comes along with it, because that's always something that does make it a little more palatable if you're going to preclude parking. And I think you already have the authority to ban overnight parking. I just don't think you enforce it. Because last time I looked at the parking regulations, there was an overnight parking ban for the city. And but it's not. I couldn't find it today, but I'd suggest that you already have that authority. But I think there are some ways to do it. We've got a wonderful resource in the garages. It was very foresighted of the city to put them in place to deal with the issues that accommodating vehicles in the downtown and deal with the growth in the downtown. And a little consistent enforcement and being fair about it, but also creating some of the inducements that, for guests or for people who are coming to do business downtown, having some sort of validation might go a long way to help too. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Some great points. If there is a current overnight ban, it's the best kept secret, I'll tell you that. But we'll look into it. Thank you again. And visitor issues come up again, Jim, as you can see. Now, the last thing we want you as residents to say to your friends and family is, don't come down, there's nowhere to park, please, okay? We want to encourage you have visitors, okay? But let's see if we can come up with a compromise, Jim, whether it's those side streets or somewhere in between, to be a little more resident-friendly, if you will, to give them. Steve,
Yeah.
you want to add?
One point I was going to say is that the Roy Garage has a really good utilization rate because it's got both residential component and the business component. And one time I heard it was like 110%. And that's because there are people who don't park during the day and businesses and other people park there. So, it can work, and it takes just some effort on the part of all of us. And it's a little bit of pushing the residents who, if you're not going to enforce it, why should I do anything?
That's a good point. Thank you again, Steve. And Jim, to you once more. Business validation. I know I was approached by Chuck Saber of the incoming bishops that he'd be interested in getting that reestablished. So let's put that in you. Anybody else from the public like to speak? Okay, close that portion of the hearing. Councilor Kennedy, to you.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that the idea of the overnight parking ban was suggested as an alternative to the enforcement on Saturday. It was never intended or never suggested that it would complement it, or that you would do both. So I just want to point that out. I think the way this reads is maybe a little bit, it might be a little bit confusing, but I think that's important to point out. Thanks.
Councilor, if I stand correct, I think the intent is to carry forward with both, to be honest with you. That would be Saturday enforcement along with the parking ban. I think that what we're looking at, and, they have challenges naturally, but to my knowledge, yeah, it's to implement the enforcement on Saturdays and a parking ban. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Mr. Chairman, in the discussions that I've had regarding this, I've always seen the overnight parking ban as an alternative. In other words, I thought that if you just did the overnight parking ban, either on the weekends or during the week, that you need not do anything else, that would provide enough incentive for residents to use their garage spot rather than to stay on the street, particularly on the weekend. So I think if we're going to do enforcement, there's no need for the overnight parking ban as well.
Okay, that may be your understanding and your stance. Thank you, Councilor. You made a good motion for the manager's administration to come up with a study and some facts on this, and I think that would be very revealing, if you will, to your point. Councilor Martin?
Thanks. I just have one question. I've heard from, admittedly, not that many residents on this issue, but the ones that I have heard from are people I know that they've made significant investments in the downtown, people that are trying to be reasonable, as the folks here are tonight have been. And some people, and I had not heard this from businesses, but at least some residents have said they vehemently oppose the overnight parking ban, but they wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it on the weekends. And I don't know if any of the residents here tonight have a view on that. I know you probably can't speak for your organization, and maybe you don't have a view, maybe you need to think about it, but if you did, I'd be interested to hear what that is.
Thank you, Councilor. Jack? Yep.
That's a very good point, but from some of the comments that I've heard about people, particularly in terms of having visitors over, they would have a problem on the weekends. In fact, one person mentioned something which I wasn't aware of, that if you happen to have somebody staying over on a weekend and they come in after, I don't know what time it is, that 6 o'clock or something, they have the event parking, which is actually a good rate. It's $5. But so that's all well and good. But if they come in and they have to pay that, and then they happen to stay over past, I think it's something like 7 o'clock in the morning, then they're back on the clock at that time, which wouldn't occur during the week. During the week, the most you'd have to pay would be $8 for a 24-hour period. So I think weekends would be a particular problem for some people. And just thought I'd mention it. Thanks.
Yep. And before I pass on to Councilor Rourke, but I've received calls and emails too, like you, Counselor, and the residents seem to be more opposed. The businesses are in favor, so we're gonna, gonna have to find a compromise. The residents want to have visitors and want to be able to use the street. While at the same time, businesses claim it's all hurting them. So there's gonna be hopefully a compromise in the coming weeks where we can find a fine line, a common ground, a discounted rate in the garage or some kind of validation, or the outskirts, the Lee and Page Street area, for visitors to sit overnight, where it's really not all doing that kind of damage to retailers. So, thank you very much. Councilor Rourke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After hearing Mr. Moynihan and Steve speak on the subject, and the committee here as well, Jim, maybe a possible solution could be if we went 8 to 8, Monday through Saturday, if the overnight parking didn't work, again, that would increase, hopefully, the turnover for businesses and allow those that do want to spend the night, they can spend the night, as long as they're up at 8 o'clock the next day, or to either that to stop paying. So maybe something to look at. Maybe you can do it in 8 to 8, Monday through Saturday, or if you believe that 10 to 8 on a Saturday is good enough for enforcement, but just an option. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm sure Jim's making note of that. Anybody else? We're also joined by Councilor Samaras. Bill, would you like to?
Yes, thank
Thank
you. I'm Stroop. Sorry for coming in late, but there's a parking lot opposite the Armand LeMay monument off of University Ave. And some of the neighbors are concerned about that area, that a lot of students take over that parking lot. People leave their car in that parking lot. Then the small businesses that are there are also concerned because there's never enough parking for for people to park in that lot. So it seems to be a park that needs to be looked at in the sense of what is its purpose. In other words, is it for the neighbors? When can they use it? When can the business people use it? It just seems to be one of those small parking areas that is left out of the loop and has become, in a sense, a parking lot for certain people just to leave their car there. So if you can just check into that. So the issues are too many university students are allegedly parking in the area where the residents don't have access. Then another aspect is the businesses are not having access to it. So if you can look into that, appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Mr.
I
Troop?
can address Councilor Samaras.
Please do.
That lot is it's approximately 40 spaces, and it's a 4-hour lot. And we know that basically our customers over there are the university students that are attending classes. Outside of our enforcement hours, we know that the customers over there are actually the residents in that area. Parking is tight, we know that. And we're pretty courteous and lenient outside of the enforcement hours to that area. And again, it speaks to the topic we talked about. If we identify some areas that need to be focused on through the Saturday and outside of what our current enforcement is, we'd be happy to include that if that's a problem area.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anybody else? One of my colleagues like to? Okay, all right. And in closing, Jim, so we have the input from some of the residents. I think I received a few emails that they were unable to make it. By the time traffic these days, by the time they get home, it was difficult for them to get down here to chime in. So as we get a report from the manager, they will get their chance for probably at least another public hearing or two. But you see the balance here that we need to come up with, because downtown is a neighborhood. We have residents who we value, that have visitors that we value, and we still want that to continue, but without taking a heavy toll on merchants as what's been happening, okay? So let's try and find that fine line. I'm sure we can do it. We have several models of cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth. They're going through the same issues, and that's what you and I have been investigating. So we'll see what we come up with there, and hopefully find a good middle ground that makes everybody happy. And go ahead.
Councilor, if I may, you and I have had many discussions on this, trying to come to a resolution. And if I could offer just a recommendation and maybe even an invitation while we get our report prepared to present. I actually like the idea of separating the two pieces of this, the enforcement as well as the overnight ban. We may see that the enforcement on a Saturday and outside of the hours may not require us to focus on overnight, and it might actually generate some goodwill for the residents downtown that now take advantage of it. If they're out of there during when businesses are open, and we want to create that turnover, it might prove beneficial. We have talked about this for quite some time. We're ready to proceed based on the wishes of council. We're ready to go with our staff. I think that in doing some research on overnight bans, there was nothing that indicated to me that it actually comes to an end game where it has improved parking spaces available during daytime hours. Some of the key components that, or the benefits to an overnight ban has been reduced crime, the possibility of cleanliness, and a couple of other minor things. But I think those would be key to the downtown areas more than what enforcement would provide during the daytime. And that's why I think that maybe it might be better to separate these two, maybe move forward with enforcing to the ordinance hours, and then exploring the opportunity of an overnight ban and what other added benefit we have to the downtown that might provide.
No, it's a very good point, Jim, because there's two components to this, you're right. And it probably, down the road, will end up splitting into two components, if you will. But, yes, the parking ordinance is stated, we can vote on tonight, regular. But we're going to wait, as Councilor Keddy made the motion, which I think was a good motion, to wait for along with the manager's feedback to the council. We'll take a vote. But even then, I'd still like a grace period, as Councilor Martin and Rourke alluded to not to blindside the residents. If hypothetically speaking, 2 to 3 week period, we come back with a positive information from yourself, and then we may take a vote to enforce the ordinances. I would still like a 2-week grace period, if you will, for PR purposes. I don't think it's right that we slide this in the middle of the night to all residents as well. They're a part of our downtown, and we owe them that. So it's been already, I don't know, a number of years the way things are. A few more weeks isn't going to be devastating. So
The invitation still stands. I would like to hear feedback in order to add that to any report that's provided to council.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Jim Nicky, for your time. Downtown residents, thank you. And I want you to know that, this council represents you too as well. I don't want you to feel targeted. Businesses have spoken, and if you have an issue, we'll be there for you in a heartbeat as well. So thank you for your input and what you do for the downtown, for showing up here tonight. Thanks to my colleagues. Anybody else, anything to say in closing?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.